Hello, everybody. In this episode, we will talk to Adrian Rosebrock, who is a successful computer vision entrepreneur and a very popular blogger. He started his company PyImageSearch without taking a dime of venture capital funding. He did this by executing many successful crowdfunding campaigns. In this episode, we will learn various aspects of starting a business, how to build an audience, how to come up with product ideas, and how to manage your time and effort as an entrepreneur. PyImageSearch produces free tutorials and it has many good courses and books. So I encourage you to check it out if you already do not know about PyImageSearch. Without further ado, let's dive in and talk to Adrian. I'm your host, Satya Malik, and this is our podcast, AI for Entrepreneurs. Welcome, Adrian. It's such a pleasure to have you on our show, and I'm so thankful that you're here.
Oh, thank you, Santi. It's truly a pleasure to be here. I feel like really humbled and honored. You know, when I started PyImageSearch, it was just a small little blog, and like to be here and like talking with like the CEO of OpenCV. That's really awesome. And by the way, like huge congrats on becoming the CEO. I know for a long time you had that interim CEO in your signature, and I think that amazing Kickstarter campaign that you and Brandon ran for Oak, like phenomenal success. And to my knowledge, I think it's probably the most successful embedded hardware crowdfunding campaign. I can't think of any other campaign that's brought in 1.3 million. So huge thanks to you, and huge thanks to Gary and the rest of the OpenCV team for 20 years of the open source community. It's just truly a testament to what the community can accomplish. Like I love it, and I'm sure you're proud of it as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I mean, actually, Occipital was, I did my research, and Occipital was probably the second one. They raised 1.29 and we raised $1.36 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so close, but if you want to pick a winner, then. But, in all fairness, these guys, the Occipital guys, were also advising us. So it's not really a competition. They were on the Vikas was on the list of people who advised us as well.
Okay.
So yeah. Now, but this show is about you, and I want to focus exclusively on you. There are very few people, very few bloggers who have had such an impact on the OpenCV community. Pretty much anybody who starts with OpenCV has they probably know you already, or they have hit your blog while researching something. So, to understand an entrepreneur, we need to understand their background. So I want you to walk us, through your background. First, tell us about yourself, and then I would like to know, growing up, how your childhood was. What were the influences in your childhood?
Yeah, sure. So for background, I have a Ph.D. in computer science with a focus in computer vision and machine learning. An entrepreneur and an author. I've always loved writing. One of my early childhood memories is, I think as an entrepreneur as well as a writer, was I used to write like little stories on index cards, and then it would be like 20 pages of index cards, like little short stories front and back. And I would like staple them together and like cut up a piece of cardboard and like design the cover of it and put it all together. And I would sell it to my parents for 50 cents.
Wow.
So that was back when I was probably like 9-10 years old. And it's just kind of weird how those little things you do as a child like end up impacting you as an adult, and in some cases your entire career. So that's actually the very first book I ever wrote. I think I wrote on PyImageSearch that Practical Python and OpenCV is my first book, but that's technically not true. I was selling books to my parents way back when. We grew up I grew up in rural Maryland, like middle of nowhere. My high school was Francis Scott Key High School, but we always called it Cornfield High because there's nothing but cornfields. Like, you just drove through a farm practically to get to the high school. So super rural life. College, I went to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is just outside Baltimore. and lived there for about 6-7 years while I did my undergrad and my Ph.D. And then after grad school, I went to Connecticut. My wife had a job up there. Girlfriend at the time, eventually married her. We were there for 6-7 years, and now we just moved to Philadelphia.
That's great. So, during your childhood, what were the early influences in your life, your parents, your family? Tell us more about, because, to understand an entrepreneur, I really feel that you have to understand their background, where they're coming from. So walk us through some of your childhood experiences.
Yeah, definitely. My childhood was honestly like really, really traumatic. I had Lyme disease when I was a kid, so growing up in rural Maryland, like I played outside all the time, and in the woods, that was our playground. We didn't have any jungle gyms, so my friend and I, we would go out in the woods and play all the time. And I guess somehow I ended up getting bit by a tick, and probably a few months after that, started having really, really bad symptoms. When my parents and I were on vacation, we had to leave, come home early. And then from there, it was just a fight of like, what in the world do I have? Like, what is making me sick? So
And for
at the
people
time,
who don't know about Lyme disease, this can be, you feel very depleted of energy for about a month or more.
so basically, it's an autoimmune disease, and it depends on the person, but every 1 to 2 months, you'll develop a super super high fever, like over 100.
Wow.
Your joints will completely lock up. You typically like lose appetite, but that's dependent on the actual patient. So it's a very debilitating, type of disease to contract. And it's especially hard to diagnose, because it comes and goes. Like 1 month you're perfectly fine, and then the next month you're sick. You get over it, but it just repeats, and it's very cyclical, and it can take a long time to actually discern the pattern.
Does it cure itself, or do you take medications for that?
No, you have to take medication for it, and you have to take it, ideally within the first couple of years that you get it, because otherwise you can actually develop some severe problems.
Wow.
Sometimes fatal, but typically it's like you develop arthritis at an extremely young age. Like you just really lose a lot of mobility in your joints, and it can be fatal in certain situations.
Wow. That's terrible. I was under the impression that Lyme disease affects you for about a month or two, but as you said, that it can continue for a very long time and it can recur.
Oh, absolutely. And back then, Lyme disease was something that a lot of doctors on the East Coast of the United States only believed that could happen up in farther up north, like in New York, specifically Westchester County. So it's really unheard of to doctors to think that Lyme disease could happen in some place, as far south as Maryland. So for a long time, no one could properly diagnose me, and it was actually my father who actually properly diagnosed me in the first place.
Wow.
He has a PhD in essentially autoimmune research and infectious diseases. And weirdly enough, 10 years prior, he had studied Lyme disease for quite a bit while he was working for, can't remember what government organization, but when he was in the military, he did some research there. And I went to the family doctor, just as I did every time I got sick. And my father asked the doctor for a vial of my blood, and then took it back to his lab and ran it. And he saw all the classic markers of Lyme disease. So then it became a fight of taking it to the doctors and be like, this is clearly Lyme disease, but they don't want to overprescribe antibiotics, at fear of causing, other diseases to mutate and not be effective against the antibiotics. So I was very sick. I missed all of second grade essentially, and part of third grade as well. That was that was like a little challenging, because that's when you're developing your social skills and you're learning how to interact with other kids.
Yeah, and you were in second grade, which is you're probably 8 years old, 9 years old. Wow.
Right.
Yeah. You also mentioned about the mental health problems that your mother went through, and you mentioned it a few times on your blog, on your newsletters. Walk us through, how challenging it was.
Yeah, my mother suffers from bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, any host of those mental health issues in that family. And that was a struggle growing up, because she was just in and out of the psychiatric ward, probably from the time I was in fourth grade, even till now, she still struggles, and she has a lot of problems. And it's tough talking about mental health issues because back then there was a lot of stigma. Like you didn't want to talk about that, especially in like a rural area. Like you feel like if you brought that up, like you were less of a family or less of a person because of it. So that was just a brutal experience growing up, because I remember the first time we dropped her off at the mental health facility. It was myself, my father, and my grandparents, and it was like later in the evening. Dropped her off. She said she would go through with the treatment and try and make herself better. We drove home with just myself and my father, and realized, hey, it's 8:00 at night. We haven't had any pizza, or we haven't had any dinner. So it was like, let's stop and get some pizza. And like I remember just like sitting as a little kid, sitting at that table, eating a slice of pizza, and just looking my father dead in the eyes and saying, "Dad, I feel so much more calm now." And I think that like really haunts him to this day, because it really just shows just what just a really bad situation we were all in, and truly trapped in it, because the person suffering from mental health issues, they need help. Like they certainly deserve help, and they should be accommodated, and you should do everything in your power to make sure they're okay. But the issue specifically with my mother is that she never wanted to adhere to the treatment. She didn't want to adhere to her medication, and it just caused this like cyclical relapse. It just got worse and worse and worse. Ultimately until I left home at 18. But again, there's still issues that exist.
Yeah, so one of the things with mental health issues is that you can control them, but they never usually they don't go away. You have to manage them.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of responsibility
Right.
to actually do that. And it's sad, because sometimes like certain mental health issues, they make you less responsible, but in order to get better, you have to be more responsible.
Yeah.
And it's just such a problem. And when COVID started, I felt really, really bad for people. Obviously because of the virus, but even more so because I knew there were people who were trapped in the same situation that I was in as a kid. And like high school for me was, some of the just horrific experiences of my life, with my mother just being very sick. And at least at that time, I had friends who had cars. So like we got to go out, we got to like go to coffee shops, we got to go to the movies. Like I made sure to get out of the house every single day. With at the height of the COVID pandemic, when the restrictions were at their worst back in March and April and May, I knew there were people who were trapped in their homes, especially kids who could not get away. They were just living in that hell day in and day out. And I know the impact that impact that can have on a person, and how it really influences how they grew up.
Right.
So like I really thought, like, what could I do about this? So at the time, we were just offering sales in all of our books and courses. I put together some free resources for people to, what I said, like, isolate and learn at the same time. If you need a retreat, if you need an escape, like, come here and learn from us. We have our free material, we have our paid material as well. I said 10% of whatever we make is donated to the Child Mind Institute, which is an institute to help with mental health issues with children and families. So it was really great. We raised about a little over $10,000 for them by the time the sale ended. And, to me, that was super important, because while the virus is definitely bad, and I feel sorry for people who are impacted by it, but I also know there are people who are going to live through the mental health problems in these families. And in some ways that's going to be worse. And I want to be able to do what I can to help them.
Yeah, it's terrible, especially if you decide to confine yourself completely. So even I never really confined myself to. I wake up very early. So what I used to do is at 5 a.m. I would go to the beach and spend some time there, and that way, I was not confined to my room the whole day, and that really creates and contact with nature actually elevates your mood quite a bit. So making those kinds of choices can also help a little bit. I'm not saying that it's going to completely help, but being in nature, get up early and be with, take a walk or something like that can have a huge impact in terms of, keeping your sanity. It is still really tough times,
And I hope, if anything, COVID just encourages people to take care of themselves more and look inward and look for, gratitude journals and meditation, just anything they can do to make themselves more sustainable.
That's right. That's right. So tell me a little bit about your, how did you get interested in computer science, out of your childhood, and then computer vision. How did you get interested in both those topics?
Yeah, definitely. When I was a kid, like I loved playing sports like soccer, basketball, baseball. I just played every sport that I possibly could. I loved every component of it. But the problem was by the time I was in middle school, I developed a condition with my knees called Osgood-Schlatter's disease, and it basically just like the tendons and muscles are outgrowing your bones to the point where your knees lock up or whatever joint you have, like that joint becomes extremely painful to move. So at that point, like I couldn't play sports like I wanted to towards the end of high school or end of middle school going into high school. So I needed something else to do. One of my close childhood friends at the time, Andrew, his father was a programmer. He wrote code in Java. He was like a very Linux nerd type of guy, really sweet man. But being friends with Andrew, I learned how to write code from them. So I learned like basic HTML. And I thought I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like I have a website on like freewebs.com. I don't even know if that website even exists anymore, but
Right.
we had fun with it. We were learning as we were doing.
Yeah.
And then Ben, one of my other close friends, he was an artist. Like he loved web comics. He created web comics. So in middle school, I wrote the HTML for a basic webcomic website, and he created the art. And in high school, like I continued to develop, so I was writing dynamic web pages using PHP, and I was learning BASIC and C++.
So this was which year? So your high school must have been 1999, around that time?
See, I would have graduated high school in 2007, so this was like 2003,
2003, 2004. Okay, so
Yeah.
.com had passed completely.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess my first computer vision project was in senior year of high school. I took an AP statistics class, and instead of a final exam, our teacher was like, go out in the real world, find some data, and like apply statistics to it in some way, and then write a paper on it and create a presentation on it and show it to the class. And at that time, I had studied like basic information retrieval, so like building text search engines. So I understood the concept of, okay, let's count the number of words in a document and then like apply like some basic mathematical operations to them, and then be able to pull out similar pieces of text from that small data set.
Right.
But I was getting really curious about image data because it's so much easier to work with text. Like it's more intuitive as a person to work with text. It's more intuitive to write code for software that can understand text.
Right.
And how does computer vision work? And like I tried to read textbooks on it, but it was just so far over my head because I had nowhere near enough mathematical background. Like I was like a 12th grade kid, like trying to read like linear algebra and multivariable calculus. Like nope, can't do that. So I decided I like text search engines. Is it possible to do image search engines using basic stats?
Yep.
So I wrote a basic web scraper that gathered like a data set of 50. It was either 50 to 100 images online.
That used to be the scale at that time.
Yeah, exactly. That was like
yeah, enough.
Yeah, it's like that's like the ImageNet. Like 100. I have 100 images that are labeled.
Right.
So my idea was, okay, if I compute like the mean and standard deviation and the histogram and like the kurtosis of the histogram and all this other stuff, that I can create this list of numbers that quantify the images. And if I compute the distance between these features, ideally they'll have similar semantic meaning. So that was my 12th grade AP stats project. I wrote it all in Java. I don't know why I didn't.
Well, that was the programming language of choice at that time. People were reading either C++ or Java. The newer kids were learning Java. The older ones were learning C++.
I wish I still had that project, so I'm sure it was just like 200 lines of horribly written code that would be impossible to decipher.
Well, all code that is written by anybody, the code that I wrote 2 years back looks horrible to me now. It's always like that. It's funny. And then how did you decide on an undergrad program? And, I also want people who are listening, some of them are students, they may be in undergrad. So how do they make this choice of picking up computer vision. Now it is slightly easier, but back in your day, it was not obvious that computer vision would take off. I remember
Right.
I was at a conference with, Gary Bradsky was there. That was the first time I met him. And he was going on and on about how computer vision is a complete failure. And I was so annoyed. I was going to speak up, but I was at that conference by chance. My advisor was invited to that conference, and he couldn't make it, so he asked me to go. So I just decided to check his name tag, and there it was, Gary Bradsky. So I shut up my mouth. Yeah. So I shut up my mouth, but I was very disappointed after that. This was in 2003. I was very disappointed after that conference that these top people in computer vision think that this field has failed.
Yeah.
But now things are on, much better. But still, walk us through your journey. How did you decide that, okay, you wanted to be in computer vision? And how does one person who is actually contemplating getting into computer vision and AI come to that conclusion themselves? The students who are thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I mean, my journey was like a little weird just due to the time back then. Like we didn't have undergrad computer vision courses, and libraries like OpenCV and the like weren't accessible. You really had to be deeply involved, like probably like a postgraduate level, just to really understand what was going on. So I went into college thinking that I wanted to focus exclusively on information retrieval, like just text search engines. That's what I thought I wanted to do. So my entire first 2 years, maybe even first 3 years of undergrad, I just took every information retrieval course I could find. I read every IR textbook that I could possibly find. But I found myself like getting a little bored because I'm like, even back then, like 2000, 2010, information retrieval, I won't go as far as to say it's a solid field, but we can do it really, really, really well at this point.
Right.
There's the gains are marginal on most things in information retrieval. So I was like, this won't be able to sustain my life afterwards. It's not, while I appreciate the field, I love the field, it's not going to drive me to be successful. So then I went back and looked at computer vision because that was my second love. Man, I would love to like really dig into this stuff. But I was an undergrad at the time, and all the computer vision courses or actually the only course we had was a computational photography course. And it was only for graduates. So I went to my advisor. I was like, listen, I want to learn this. I know it's graduate only. Obviously, I'll pay for the course, but will you please like let me take it as an undergrad? And they're like, go talk to the professor. So I went to the professor. I just begged him, like, please let me into this course. I want to learn it so bad. So that was my first foray into computer vision, and our very first project was to install OpenCV on our systems. And this is back in the day before pip install. This is back before CMake.
Right.
This is like way there weren't even NumPy Python bindings to the library.
Was it a 7-day project?
Yeah, and it took most students 14 days. He gave us an extension on it because it was brutal. Luckily, I was like, I'm going to do this in a virtual machine because I know I'm going to botch something eventually. So after each step, I was taking snapshots of the VM and like throwing it on an external hard drive. That way I could pull it back if I needed it. But it took me a long, long time. And oh my God, it was brutal.
That's true. That was the state at that time.
Yep. But as for new students, it's so much easier. And I like to, even though I have an academic background to a degree, I have the Ph.D. in computer science. I have a lot more of a practitioner view on the world. I relate it to learning how to play guitar. When I was in like 6th grade, I was like, I want to learn how to play guitar. I want to be an amazing guitarist. So my parents like bought me like a cheap, guitar and amplifier from Walmart for like $50 and signed me up for guitar lessons. And I did it for 2 years, and I loved my teacher. He was a nice guy, but it showed me the limitations at the time because everyone was so focused on theory. They're like, you must learn music theory. You must learn how to properly understand time signatures and notes and be able to read sheet music at a very high level. And to me, I was like, I just want to figure out if I like strumming this thing. Like, I don't know if I want to do this as a career. I don't know if I want to study it. Just let me figure out if I want to actually do this. And I gave it up after 2 years. I got fed up with it. And about 3 years ago, I picked it back up again, but I found a different guitar teacher. So like, again, just help me figure out if I want to do this. Yeah. And he was like, okay. And then he created a system that teaches theory through actual practical learning. Like you learn certain specific, guitar riffs, which translate into certain pentatonic scales. And you're like, you learn something practical, but it also has a bit of theory element. So it gives you a hint as to whether or not like you actually want to be doing this more. Right. And that's what I think the computer vision and deep learning community is now. Like libraries are easier to install. There are 1 or 2 simple commands. With Python, it's a simple import statement. That's true. So I tell people, like, if you're an undergrad or even a grad student and you think you want to do computer vision, and certainly if you want to do it in industry, just go to a website like opencv.org or PyImageSearch or whatever website you find on Google, and just run an example. Write the code in an IDE, execute it, and see what the result is. Because the reality is, in academia, in grad school and college, you're going to be learning more theory. You're going to be deeply involved in that. However, depending on your job after college, you're not going to be reading as many research papers depending on your job. You're going to be spending a hell of a lot more time in your IDE, in a Jupyter notebook, writing code and analyzing results. So figure out if you like doing that, if you like sitting in that IDE, if you like looking at the results. Right. And then if you actually like that, cool. Then talk to your advisor and say, hey, I'm interested in this more. Please sign me up for that class.
What are your thoughts on master's versus PhD? I get this thing a lot. And when I give my honest answer, my friends accuse me of being a hypocrite. But I want your take on that. What do you think? Should people go for master's or PhD?
This is probably a little controversial to say, but I have to thank my father for this. Schools are and universities are businesses just like everything else. Yeah. And they want their numbers and their metrics to look good. So a little trick I would say is, if you truthfully think you want a PhD or you think you want to strive for a PhD, it is well worth signing up for the PhD program and giving it a shot, because the course requirements for a PhD and a master's are going to be very, very similar. The difference at the end is either, a little bit of research or a project or a lot of research. But schools need it.
In universities like UCSD, it's almost like buy one, get one free. So right. The master's just drops off while you're on your PhD course.
Right. And the other way to look at it is, you can think of as a master's as a consolation prize if you can't do your PhD, because universities want to keep their graduations rate high enough. They have a certain threshold. They need to be competitive in the grad school market. So if they see a PhD who's been sitting in their program for 10 years, they'll be like, just write this short little thing, here's your certificate, get out the door. And that's the honest truth is, if you want to go for a PhD and you fail, you might still get your master's without much effort.
That's right. Because master's, you are not expected to do anything new. In PhD, you have to produce something novel, right? That's the novelty factor is there. But then again, let me finish asking that question. Master's or PhD, how do people decide between a master's or a PhD? You're saying that if you're remotely interested in research, then go for a PhD program. And if you change your mind, you'll still end up with a master's. Is that
right?
Okay.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I feel that people who are research oriented and are ready to have that experience where, it's a lot of failure, because most of the things that you think are novel, you come up with a new idea, and then you do your research and you figure out that it's been done, in 1960s. This was. So it takes a lot of iteration to get to that one novel idea. And then it doesn't just need to be novel, it should actually be better. And that is often very tough, right? So I did have a lot of papers during my PhD, but it was lucky in the sense that I was working in 2 different fields in cryo-electron microscopy. And so whenever I used to get bored with one, I would just switch to other. And finally, in the last year, my PhD advisor said that, you have to pick one and do it. So I ended up with 15 papers during my PhD, but they were split in two different fields.
Sure.
So, and it also depends, there were many times that I felt that in the first year, especially in the first 2 years, I felt that I'm actually going to quit after my master's. It's only when I got a good lab. My lab mates were excellent. My PhD advisor was really, really good. That's when I decided, yes, this is worth it. So those things are also important, not just what you want, but what environment you are in.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, when choosing a grad school, don't choose a school based off of its name. Like, you think of like Stanford and Caltech and Carnegie Mellon as like your schools for artificial intelligence and computer vision. I think it's far more important to try, if possible, to choose your advisor first. So look for an advisor that has the same interests that you do, and then go read their papers and see what their research is, and then email them directly and see if you can start a conversation with them and develop that rapport early on, even before like you apply to the school. And the reason I say this is because it's very easy to get trapped in your PhD, to feel isolated and alone, because you're pushing the state of the art. And truly, by the time you earn your PhD, you know more about your specific research interest than any other person in your defense room. Like, you know it.
Right.
Like you do know it. You may not have confidence in yourself, but your advisory board, they're there to pick you apart, but they don't know as much as you do, and they know it. And it's a funny situation to be in. But the point is, like, don't get so fixated on the school. You want to find an advisor that's going to have the same research interest as you, because they're going to be more willing to help you. They're going to be more capable of helping you through tough times in your research. I love my PhD advisor to death, but UMBC was not a school known for computer vision. It had one or two professors that did stuff in graphics, but it was predominantly artificial intelligence and distributed systems. So I was pretty alone and isolated when I did my PhD, and that was a bit of a challenge. And if I did it all over again, I'm not sure I would do it any differently per se, because I think it worked out in the long run for me. But for someone just trying to get through grad school, try the advisor approach first rather than getting overly fixated on the specific school.
Yeah, I agree. In my case, my advisor was really good, and it really helped make that decision. But do you think that a PhD is absolutely required for a career in AI?
That's a good question. And really, I don't think a PhD is necessary, especially not anymore. For me, as an entrepreneur, like, the way I look at a PhD is it's really good job security. So if anything really horrible were to happen to a business I was running, or if I fell in tough times financially, with that PhD, it's a lot easier for me to go to like a local community college and say, look, like, I have a PhD in comp sci. Can you let me teach comp sci 101?
Right.
Yes. And since I have that PhD, I'm more likely to be hired over someone with a master's, or someone who has pure industry expertise. Even if that industry person has far more knowledge than I do, that PhD.
The credential part really helps. That's
exactly.
True. That's
so.
True.
But maybe 10, 15 years ago, certainly there's an argument to be made for having a PhD in computer vision and computer science. But at this point, with deep learning and computer vision so accessible, I think it's more important to have that practitioner mindset, to have a repository of projects you've created solving real world problems. Maybe you have a little bit of research experience as well.
Right.
But if you want to go into academia, if you want to do research, if you want to work in a non-industry lab, then that's the cutoff when I say, yeah, you really need to like consider that PhD as a requirement. You're going to have a much harder time like being successful at a university or a research lab or getting tenure without that PhD.
Yeah, I agree with that. So now you finished your PhD and you jumped right into entrepreneurship. I did the same thing. I did exactly the same thing. So I want to hear about your story. You had a few initial companies before you started PyImageSearch. Tell us about those companies and how did you get started with those companies? Was there any funding? How did you do the whole thing?
That's a great question, and kind of fun story. My first job in the computer science space was I was about 18 or 19 years old. Fresh out of high school, going to college at UMBC. I was like, man, I am so tired of being a broke kid without a car and like nothing to do. So I'm gonna go find a job. So I got on Craigslist and I just searched for like web developer positions because at that time I knew PHP extremely well. I was developing websites not only for a hobby but for a little bit of income for friends and family. It's like I'm gonna find a web developer job.
Yeah.
So I found a hit on Craigslist and interviewed with a business owner. He used to own RateMyTeachers.com, which is like Rate My Professors
Right.
for like high school and middle school people and teachers. So I got that job, and this was 2006, right before the housing bubble just completely destroyed the market. So it was a group of, I think, 10 or 12 of us, half on working on another website, half working on Rate My Teachers. And it was like overnight, like the team just disappeared, like gone.
Wow.
No money, just money completely dried up. One of the websites shut down. And by end of 2008, I think it was just me, the CEO, and like maybe one other person.
Wow.
So like I started off as the junior web developer. About a year later, by default, not due to my knowledge, I became the senior web developer, even though I certainly did not earn that credential at all. But I stayed there, and I did grad school, and I worked about 40 hours a week the entire time, and it was I hated it and I loved it at the same time. It showed me that I did not want to do I did not want to do web development as a career. That was plain to me by year 2 or 3. But I was grateful for the experience because it gave me a ton more real world experience than anyone in my class. So I could see the theory in like our data structures and our algorithms class, but I could also look at some of the projects I was developing and be like, well, that algorithm isn't going to work here. We use this data structure instead. So I was getting tons of real world experience. So I had a good income as a college student, and I was able to pay for my college and help with rent. My parents were very generous and were able to help me a bit as well. But I guess I worked on that job until the final year of grad school. We decided we were going to sell the company, and that's what we did. It gave me just enough money to pay for the rest of my grad school and basically have 6 months to wrap up school. And I was done my PhD as well, but due to department regulations, I had to stay in the program for a certain number of semesters. That way the school gets properly paid. So I had a semester to do just essentially whatever I wanted.
Nice.
Previous in late undergrad, I started I think it was called Chic Engine. It was a fashion search engine. So you be like, hey Satya, I love your shirt. You take a photo of the shirt and like return similar items online. And that was a horrible business for a college student to build because I didn't understand it was a two-sided marketplace. You needed like users of the application, but then you also needed like businesses to agree to give you like an affiliate fee for like actually sending traffic that converted to their websites. So I put that online, and I think it made about $3 per month for like 2 years. I was like, great, I can buy a soda. That is wonderful.
Here's an interesting story. So when I was building my consulting business, the first group I found in India was this very talented group of people who were building an application where you could take a picture of your shirt and then search an online shop for that. And I reached out to them because I knew that there was no way. We had tried to do the same thing with my first company. And we did not go all out. We actually just said that suppose we had the product, we went to our clients, would you actually buy it? And everybody said they are very interested in it, but nobody signed a contract. So we actually never built the product. So there was these guys who were building this thing. I tried out the product and it worked beautifully, right? And they had been around for 2 years. So I reached out to them and asked, I don't think you're making money. Are you making money? Right? So they said, no, we have not been paid paid each other for a year. So they had been doing this. And then I reached out to them. I said, we can do this consulting gig if you're interested. And that's how I started my consulting company from a
Oh,
fake.
that's cool.
Yeah, the fashion. It was exactly this product, and they never made any money from that product. It's one of those ideas that sounds so compelling, but unless you do a test on it, unless you ask people to pay for it, it actually you don't realize that it's actually an idea that will not produce results.
Right. It's all about
That product market fit and
finding that market to actually pay for that
Yeah.
the product. And that was my lesson learned from Chic Engine. I then went on to ID My Pill, which same concept. Like you have a prescription pill in your hand and you want to find out what it is.
maybe
You dropped all your pills on the ground and like now you don't know which one is which, or you want to make sure the pharmacist gave you the correct pill, or maybe you found a pill in your kid's room and you want to figure out, is this a Tylenol or is this like Percocet or something I should be worried about. And the project came about in my computational photography course. I was talking to my professor, and he said, you're going to have to do a final project. You're going to have to do a little bit of research and write a basic paper. I'm like, okay, like what do you suggest? And he worked at the Naval Hospital, and he said, prescription drug identification is going to be a big deal. People want to make sure they're taking the correct pills. There's going to be more government involvement in making sure people adhere to their medication. And then also the government is very interested in counterfeit pill
medication.
Not necessarily like ecstasy tablets, but like just basically creating the same like engravings as like a Percocet or like a Viagra or something like that, a very popular pill. Only it's just sugar. It doesn't do anything.
Right. So it is
So
a counterfeit, not a knockoff. Right.
correct.
Wow.
So
The government had a lot of interest in that, and I'm just thinking in my head like, oh, this is so easy. Why don't they just apply optical character recognition to the pill? Like, there's all these markings on it, right? This is gonna be an easy project. Yeah, that was a humbling experience because you can't you can't do that in uncontrolled lighting conditions. Like imprints are not meant to be OCR. You cannot do that even in controlled lighting conditions because they embellish logos on them. Sometimes the pills aren't perfect. You have to do feature-based approaches or deep learning-based approaches, specifically with Siamese networks to do it. So I tried and failed at that, and eventually came up with this feature extraction method that could identify the top 5,000 pills in the U.S. market. And for just basic stats, at that time there were I think 31,000 prescription pills in the market in the U.S. At least half of which are round and white.
Right.
So that was a bit of a challenge, but I had a working prototype, but I didn't necessarily want to take this ugly code that I had written for just a proof of concept research statement and turn it into a business. I learned a lesson from Chic Engine to validate the market first, make sure people are actually going to pay for that application. So with ID My Pill, I did something a little different. I said, let's do human automation in the place of artificial intelligence just to validate this is the market. So I created a very basic iPhone app. I think the framework back then was PhoneGap. I think it's called Apache Cordova now. It's just, you can create an iPhone application or a smartphone application using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's incredibly easy, especially if you have a web developer background. And the way this thing worked was it was a REST API. You took a photo of the pill, uploaded it to a server, and then the server would return the result. Now, for a researcher, for a developer, for a programmer, the immediate thought is just dive in the code, figure out how to develop this artificial intelligence to recognize the pill. I took my experience from Chic Engine. I'm like, nope, not doing this. I'm going to have the server ping me to send me a text message and alert me so that I know to hop online and just research the pill real quick and then send the result back to the user. And our goal was to get it returned back in something crazy like 2 minutes. So I did that. I remember waking up at 2 a.m. to hop online and quickly identify the pill and send the result back. Right. Eventually, I hired a few people off Upwork so we could have around the clock, support for it. And I'm so happy I did that because it showed that the idea had legs, and people were actually paying for the app, downloading it to their phone, and getting the correct pill identification.
Was it a one-time payment for the app, or was it a recurring payment that they have to subscribe monthly for the app?
So the application itself was a one-time fee.
Okay.
I didn't think it had enough features to try and get monthly recurring revenue with a consumer app, which is just notoriously hard to do, and especially back then. I mean, this was 2010 to 2011.
Uh-huh.
No, maybe 2013, but still very, very hard back back in those days to develop a consumer MMR application.
Right. So that did you? I mean, what was the scale of that project, and was the project successful, profitable? What were your goals with that? Did you actually think that was profitability a goal of yours at that time, or you just wanted to, build it and then even make a loss at it and grow the audience? What were your thoughts at that time?
Yeah, so back then with that application, I wanted to basically self-employ myself so that I could, pay my rent, pay my car payment, pay myself a little bit of money.
Yeah. That way I had
an earning income, because I'm very much a bootstrapper. That's always been my kind of mentality. I worked in a business, with venture funding before, and I hated the idea of always like, just once you accept that money, you have a ticking clock above your head and a babysitter. And I could see what that did to the people around me. And more power to the people who take on venture funding. That's a hard job, and I do not envy it. Like, good for them for doing it.
Yeah, I made $0 million from my last VC-backed company, and after that, I decided that I'm going to bootstrap, and those are two very valid approaches. The thing that I did not like about VC-backed companies is that, like you said, there is a knife on hanging on top of your head, and as the time passes, PyImageSearch, all the blogs you have written on PyImageSearch, they help you in your business, right? The longer you have been at this business, the more chance of success you have. In a VC-backed startup, you have a 5-year window. You either be successful, they say, either go big or go home, right?
Yep.
And by big, they mean you have to be a $200, $300 million business, or maybe a $1 billion business. That would be good for them. But a $10 million business is not attractive for them at all.
Right.
It's a failure if you have a $10 million business. But as an individual owner, a $10 million business is fantastic.
Exactly.
You're generating a profit of $2-3 million a year. That's great. So I agree with you on that. For a lot of people, it makes sense to bootstrap. And you can have, once you're building an audience, you can bootstrap very well.
Exactly.
So that brings us to your current venture, PyImageSearch. How did you get started on it? You were, as I understand, you were already employed in a different job at that time, but you still managed to publish a blog post every week, which takes a long time. And not only that, you also managed to build a company. So walk us through that process, and when did you finally decide to come out, leave your job and do this full time?
Yeah, it was the final year of grad school. First semester of the final year, I was still working on ID My Pill. We were at that point, like, we had implemented the artificial intelligence solution, so there was no more human automation. It was running automatically. It was scaling. It was working, and we were probably getting like a couple $1,000s a month of revenue out of it. So enough to pay the bills, but not a ton more than that. And the end goal was that we wanted to make that into an API, and we didn't really want to sell the app. The app was just the proof of concept that it worked. We wanted to be able to take the API to, like, your Pfizers, to your Mercks, and say, you could implement this in your own solution, pay us for the actual API and the algorithms that we use.
Right.
I was very humbled in that experience, because I learned that in order to make a relationship like that work, you have to have a lot of connections. You have to be well connected in the medical space, which as a grad student, I certainly was not. So I got, a very real, humility check, going through that. So coming out of it, I was just frustrated. I was like, okay, like, my first, foray into cell phone business was like making like a couple bucks a month. This last one, I got like, a couple $1,000s a month, but in order to make it successful, I needed more connections and honestly venture funding money, which I didn't want to take. So I was annoyed. I was like, man, like, I'm almost finished grad school. I thought I would have something successful by now. What am I going to do? So during that final semester, as I was telling you about, I didn't have anything to do. My dissertation was done. I just could sit around and play video games all day, or I could try and work on a new business. And to me, I wanted to work on a new business, but I wanted something that was going to be easier to sell, a cheaper price tag, like a one-time payment for like, whatever product. I said, I looked at the market, I looked at my own personal knowledge. And at that point, I was good at OpenCV. I understood the Python API very well. And I was also very good at building image search engines or content-based image retrieval. So my idea was, I'm going to start a blog about building image search engines with OpenCV in the Python programming language, which is actually why the blog is called PyImageSearch, because it's Python image search.
Yeah.
And if you go back and read like my first few posts, they were all about, content-based image retrieval on a very, very basic level. And I thought, hey, I could start a blog about this, eventually write a book or course on it, and then I'll be able to sell that. It'll much easier sell, and hopefully over time it'll become something. Shortly into that, I realized that I picked too small of a niche, and it's my belief that it's always easier to go up a niche than it is to niche down. So whenever I see someone starting a website, I was like, just really consider niching all the way down. Like if you want to start a website on building, iPhone apps, then like start digging deep and be like Swift applications plus camera applications or whatever that niche is that you can get your foot in the door. Yeah. And if it turns out that market is too small, it's far easier to go from, Swift plus OpenCV plus cameras to just Swift in general. Right. So at that point, that's when PyImageSearch started. My final semester, after I wrote my dissertation, I wrote my first book. It was about, 250 pages, Practical Python and OpenCV. That book's still for sale on our website. And that was my first sale, like just writing, 20 different blog posts, publishing them, getting Google search traffic, starting an email list, and people came to look forward to my content, publishing every Monday, and enjoyed what I wrote, and they eventually trusted me with their education. The problem was that it wasn't making anywhere near enough money for me to sustain myself out of grad school.
So this was even after you had published the book?
Yeah, so let's see, I published the book probably in April, and then graduation was set to be in May. So like the book was out, it was online, it was certainly making money, but nowhere near enough for me to live on and without some other job. And all the money that I had from the sale of the company I used to work for, all of that was gone due to rent and car payments and stuff. So I was borderline broke at that point, and I realized, I need to find an actual job and get some sustainable income coming in.
And this was a full-time job, 40 hours a week at least. And
yeah.
So what did your schedule look like in those days? Has it changed anywhere now?
Yeah, luckily it's changed now, but back then it was brutal. We were doing essentially big data for the state of Maryland. Like the food stamps program, all that stuff is running on like 30-year-old hardware from Xerox, and they maintain it. And Maryland pays, God knows, like millions of dollars per month just to maintain this 30-year-old system. And we were tasked to rebuild it. And we got farther than any other company had. And then there was there's a local election. The governor changed, and the governor-elect the next day was like, nope, project over. Like you're gone. So that was a great job. It was with a startup company. It was 5 of us. I was getting a real salary, like what a Ph.D. Postgrad should be paid for their knowledge and expertise. But I was working like probably 80-hour weeks. I was waking up at 4:00 in the morning or 5:00 in the morning. I worked on PyImageSearch for 3 or 4 hours, eat breakfast, work on the stuff for this company from 8 or 9 to like 6:00 at night, eat dinner, and then another 3 or 4 hours in the PyImageSearch. And I did this every single day, including weekends, probably for the first 2 to 2.5 years of the business.
Yeah, and just for the record, people may not know that we are recording this on Labor Day, Monday, and we are both, you're working, I'm working.
Yep, the life of an entrepreneur, right?
Exactly. And a lot of times people say that they don't have the time, and I tell them that, look, there are 3 8-hour work days packed in a single day, right. In a single 24 hours. Just use 2 of them. Take time off, take 1 day off, right. 8 hours. But if you are starting something, you have to push really hard. And, I'm not saying that you have to push 16 hours every day, but 12 hours you can maintain, for many months, and that you have to do. Otherwise, there's no way out. Otherwise, you end up taking outside funding, and even finding outside funding, you have to work to get that funding. It's not free at all.
Right. Absolutely.
So, how did the PyImageSearch at what by what year were you profitable? There is this idea in this online space that once you have 1,000 true fans, then you are set. You don't have to worry about paying your bills. They will pay the bill for you. So when did you reach that point? Which year did you reach that point? Was it a Kickstarter campaign, or what brought you to that point?
Yes, I mean, I started PyImageSearch, December of or January of my final year of grad school. Got that online, started working for that startup company in May, and then probably by September, I wasn't at the point where I could quit the other job. Like I was definitely dependent on it, but I knew that if I buckled down and focused on it, that probably in 12 to 18 months that I could quit that other job and focus exclusively on PyImageSearch. But as I said, that governor-elect happened, and by December of that year, I was out of a job. Like the startup that I was working with, they were folded, and PyImageSearch was doing okay, but not at the point where I could
Just focus on it exclusively.
And this was 2013, right?
Right.
So January 2013, you started PyImageSearch, and by December, you were feeling confident that in 12 months or so, you will be able to quit. But then you were forced to quit because the governor changed the rules.
Exactly. And at that point, I had a decision to make. I could put my back against the wall and just fight for my life to try and make PyImageSearch successful, or I could continue what I was doing, like work on PyImageSearch 8 hours a day, but also work for another company for 8 hours a day. And at that point, I said, you know what? Like, I'm young. I could, if I fail, like, there's still time to recover. Like, let's just go for it. But I was genuinely like terrified about it. Like, at that point, I was living in Connecticut with my girlfriend, who would be my fiance a couple of years later. I was like concerned, like, if I go broke, and can't support us, like, and she had a phenomenal job, so she could have actually taken care of me. But I was like worried because I didn't want to like appear to be less of a human or less of a man to her because I couldn't provide for us.
Yeah,
it was pretty scary. But I said, just go for it. And January of, I guess, 2014, I launched the PyImageSearch Guru's Kickstarter campaign, and that was just meant to be a course on not just OpenCV, but computer vision in general. Like I describe it as a college level survey course
on computer vision,
but more hands-on, more code-based, more practical. And that campaign, like the very first day, I think it brought in something like $10,000. I was blown away. I had no idea what to expect. I was thinking maybe one or two. To hit 10,000, on a launch like that, to me was just mind blowing. So that campaign raised about $36,000, and that gave me like a 6-month runway to really put my back against the wall and just go. So after that point, I was working like 12 to 14 hour days, just 7 days a week, just building, creating content, just nonstop.
And you were the only one. You were the only. You had no help because you were the only one doing all this work. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't really have enough money to bring on someone with the necessary experience that I would have to do content creation. Looking back, I see numerous mistakes where I could have delegated or like hired someone on Upwork or done something better. Delegation is, as an extreme type A person like me, delegation is extremely challenging. It's always been a weakness. Yeah. Certainly trying to get better at it, but back then, like I had no concept of delegation. I was like, I have to do this. It has to be done on my standard. This is the standard that PyImageSearch is. That was a fight. That was a brutal fight.
So the book was released after 6 months. How much time did you take to complete that Kickstarter delivery?
I want to say it was a 6-month course, and I think month 1 was delivered about 3 months after the campaign, and each month subsequent after that. Yeah. So we did actually I say we because I think of my team now, but back then it was just me. I wrote, I think, about 160 lessons in about a 5-month period.
Wow.
That was brutal.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's really hard to do that kind of content creation, and not only that, it's not just writing code, but then you have to explain everything, and you have to get into the mind of the reader. They don't have the same level of experience as you, so sometimes you could be using terms, technical terms that are so obvious to you, but then you read again and you realize, oh, I've not explained this thing. You have to
Right.
go and rewrite that and explain everything. So it's really tough. So that Kickstarter campaign, it just put you on the path to profitability, let's say,
Right.
right?
Essentially, yes.
And then you did another Kickstarter campaign after that, and that became your business model, right? I mean,
Yep.
you decided that every year or so, you would do a Kickstarter campaign, release a new product, support existing products, and move forward that way.
Exactly. Yep. That's absolutely right. So I guess a year and a half after that, I ran the Kickstarter campaign for deep learning for computer vision with Python, which focuses on deep learning with Keras and TensorFlow. And that was like unbelievably successful. That the first 24 hours we did about $80,000, and then it ended, I think, at about 270,000. I was just blown away. I'm like, wow, there is just such
A market need.
Yeah.
and honestly, I can't at all take credit for that. Like I think it was a combination of luck and just preparedness. One of my favorite quotes is from Louise Pasteur, who said, "Fortune favors the prepared." So if you're grinding and putting in the work and constantly pushing what you can do, eventually luck, it's my opinion that luck will eventually find you if you can maintain that grit.
Yeah, a lot of people say, they use this formula that, oh, success is luck plus effort. And I don't like it because it almost makes you feel that even if the effort is zero, with enough luck, you will be successful. If you're going to use a small, a very simple model, then use the multiplicative model, right? Luck is, success is luck times effort, where both are important. You do need some amount of luck, but without effort, it's going to zero. No amount of
Right.
luck will get you success if you have not put in the effort, unless, it's a lottery ticket or something like that, which is very, very rare.
Sure.
Yeah. So I like this. So by that time, when you raised 270K with your next Kickstarter campaign, you were able to afford a staff, I'm guessing, at that time.
Yeah.
You had
Yeah. So
people
at that point, we brought on someone to do.
His name's David McDuffie. He does email correspondence, so he's triaging all of our emails, making sure they're routed properly to the correct person. Then we brought on Dave Hoffman, who has a master's in computer science with a focus in computer vision, and he helps me write content, so it's not solely me penning every single word anymore, which allows me to focus on higher level business operations. So at that point, it was way later than it should have been. I should have really considered hiring people after year one, certainly by
18 months.
but it took over 2 years to kind of get the first two team members.
Members in place.
And again, if I had to do it all over again, would have focused a lot more effort on delegation. It would have been less stressful in the long run, and probably improved my own physical and mental health as well.
Yeah, it's tough actually. Delegation also means that you have to spend that time to find somebody. I'm struggling with the same thing right now. I have about 711 emails on. I'm not kidding. The reason it happened this way is that initially I was responding. Even now, I respond to all the emails that I receive, but at some point it just became unmanageable, and that it kept piling on. Now I'm almost afraid to look at my emails. So the only way to get around this is that I'm going to inform my users that, look, I'm not the only one looking at these emails. I will have people looking at this. Please be aware, because people
Right.
do share. The reason I was hesitant to do that, sometimes people share personal stories, etc., and I have a communication with them, and they are sure that it's only me reading the emails, but it's become impossible. I have it's come to a point that I'm not even I'm scared to check my emails. There is so much of it, and it's difficult to explain that concept that you're not and I have this thing that I put, there are some daily goals I have, which I have to hit these goals, and then
Right.
I can check email,
Yep.
And for the last 2-3 months, it has been happening that I'm not even finishing my daily goals. and so emails are really going bad. So I have to fix that problem. But I completely understand. Just communicating with people can take 2-3 hours of your time.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to do, and you do want to help. Um, so yeah, I I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I relate like so at like a visceral level. Like I just feel it inside my chest when I hear you talk about that, because for me and my like type A-ness, like I can't just like look at my inbox and see all those emails. Like so I would dedicate like every Thursday I hit inbox zero. I would
Go through and respond.
Wow.
to like my inbox, to my LinkedIn messages, to Twitter, to Facebook, like the blog post comments. And I did this every Thursday since PyImageSearch started, all the way up until I guess 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was tracking my time as I was doing this, and I realized it got to the point where on Thursdays I could spend 8 to 10 hours doing nothing but correspondence, and that is with like a team to help me sort of like get through all that. And I was just blown away. I was like, this is too much. And I will say this was the biggest mistake that I made running PyImageSearch is not just learning how to delegate, but I didn't respect my own time enough. And I didn't realize how important my time was to the business. And I became too engrossed in spending time in emails. And in some ways, it kind of felt like if there was a question in my inbox, especially from a paying customer, that I owed them that response. That was my responsibility to get back to them. And it really just ended up me feeling like I was, giving so much of myself to this business that I didn't have anything left in return. So about 3 or 4 months ago, I just turned off blog post comments completely on PyImageSearch. I put an auto reply on our inbox saying, we get this many number of emails per day. Like we prioritize customers, but in all likelihood, we're not going to get back to you
if you're not a customer. And I
am so thankful that I made that decision, because it just improved my mental state so much. I didn't feel as burnt out as much. I didn't feel as taken advantage of as much. And it really allowed me to regain, part of myself. So if you're starting a business and you find yourself doing your own support and spending more than a couple hours per week doing this, like seriously, like either delegate it or just stop offering support altogether, because it's going to kill you in the long run.
And then there are one of those emails.
Yeah.
You know very well what kind of emails I'm talking about, which are completely obnoxious.
Right.
They completely forget the value people are providing and just focus on, you need to sell at some point because you need to make a living. So it happens to me 2 or 3 times a year where I get this nasty email which stays on my mind for half a day.
Yep.
And it's like, do you engage with these people or do you just give up at that point? It's surprising that we forget all the good emails we receive and focus on those nasty ones. It's almost human nature that you want everybody to like you, which is impossible. So so that's really tough. Now, that campaign was not the only campaign. There was an even bigger successful campaign last year. Tell us something about that campaign as well.
So we ran a Kickstarter campaign for a book called Raspberry Pi for Computer Vision, which I think at some point next year or two, we're going to just rebrand it and call it Embedded Computer Vision.
Yes.
We had written tons of content on the Raspberry Pi, and it was far more popular than I ever thought it was going to be. I didn't think the Raspberry Pi community was, one, that large, and two, like just people are so interested in video processing and computer vision. So like, okay, there's an interest here. Let's write a book on it. And as we were diving in, writing the code, putting together a campaign, that was also the same time that NVIDIA announced the Nano and Google announced the Coral. I was like, holy cow, there's so much interested in this embedded space. Like, let's cover that in the book as well.
So it was
again like fortune favors a parent. I had no idea that Google and NVIDIA were going to be releasing this stuff like 3 weeks before our Kickstarter campaign was going to be live. So I was like, oh man, this is amazing. So I like went back and rewrote the copy for like all of our marketing campaigns to really, really drive that point home. And like we did well. I think that campaign brought in about
370,000 over the
course of 30 days. So that was a fun campaign to run, and again, far beyond whatever my goals were.
And with some of these campaigns, you're promising physical books also. That is pretty tough. We are realizing now how shipping a physical product is a nightmare. The
Yes.
shipping costs and everything, it's a nightmare.
Oh, it's brutal, and it's only getting worse.
With COVID,
There's
Yeah, with COVID, well, not just COVID, but as just a logistical business perspective, like Amazon used to offer CreateSpace, which is their like their print and ship, print on demand service. That was a wonderful service, and then they took that down, and then you could only use it if you were also publishing your content on Amazon as well. But that creates a problem for entrepreneurs and marketers because they know, wait, if a user buys from Amazon, then I don't have their email address, which is the most valuable asset, so I can't follow up with them. I have no way of making more sales. So then we had to find other printers as well. And what I found over the past 4 or 5 years of printing physical books is that no matter what company you go with, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be stupid expensive to do as a self-published author, and it's honestly hard to make the numbers work. But luckily with the quality we provide, we're able to do it. But if we didn't do that, I genuinely don't think we could offer printed editions.
but do you think printed editions, there is a demand for printed editions, or you just like the fact that you want to have a printed edition?
I think it started with the fact that I wanted to offer a printed edition as a bonus. And then I found out that more and more people actually do like printed editions. I can read a physical book and get more value out of it if I was reading the book on my iPad or my Kindle. And they're the exact same contents, but there's something about the tactile nature of the physical book, the page turning, the ability to
even underlining, highlighting is easier.
Yeah, it's easier to transfer that knowledge from the book to your brain, and I think there is certainly a market for people like that that prefer that tactile quality of the text.
That's great. So we will come to your current Indiegogo campaign in a bit, but before that, I want to know, for entrepreneurs who are listening, I want to know what kind of time management wise, what does your day look like, and how do you manage your time? What parts do you delegate? What parts do you keep to yourself? Just walk us through your daily routines. Do you set goals every day? That kind of stuff, which is more for entrepreneurs, how to remain organized and also goal setting, etc.
Right. Yeah, so I take a very engineering mindset, and I say, this is the end goal of what I want to achieve in a given calendar year. And then I'll write down 8 sub goals that'll help me hit that for the year. And I look at the quarter and be like, for each quarter, what goals do I need to do? And for each month, what are my goals? And for each week, I'll pick off, these are the 8 things I need to do to make me get closer to that end goal. And then for each day, I write down in my notebook what I call, my 3 big things, barring some sort of horrific accident or something bad happening to me. And even maybe if I break my arm, whatever, these 3 things have to get done no matter what. And it's a lesson in discipline that I've developed over the years, just doing this every single day. Is the night before I sign off of work, write down those 3 big things in my notebooks. When I get started the next morning, there's no going through my Trello or Jira list of things that I have to do. It's just nope, already know them, time to sit down and get them done. And then I design my entire life around flow states. I'm a big believer in deep work and the ability just to disconnect from the distractions and just get to work and focus on it. So I carve out 2 to 3 hour blocks a time. So I'll wake up around 5 o'clock in the morning, work exclusively straight from 5 a.m. to about 7:30, eat breakfast, have another work block up until noon, eat lunch, take the dog for a walk, do some meditation, get my brain calmed down a little bit to rest. And then I have another 2 to 3 hour work block after that. And then after that, building a successful business to at least after the hustle stage. So during the hustle stage, you're working 12, 14 hours a day. But after that, if you want to build a sustainable business, you have to start looking of ways to allow your body and mind to recover. Just like a professional athlete, hops in an ice bath and, uses different massage tools, they have a chiropractor to help them. Entrepreneurs need active recovery too. For me, I recently tried infrared saunas and cryotherapy. So I look for things that will help me recharge when I'm not working, things that totally disconnect me from anything related to work. So at this point, running PyImageSearch, I try and stick to 8 to 9 hours per day. and just Monday through Friday. Maybe every now and then I have to work a little bit on the weekend, but I'm trying to be much more disciplined. And I think the discipline is what matters once you hit profitability. You can't maintain that hustle lifestyle for more than 2 or 3 years at a time. You will burn yourself out completely if you do.
Yeah, I agree. So finally your day ends at about 5:30 or so in the evening, and then you're done.
Yeah, typically by 4:35 I'm done, and I close the door to my office and I actually say to myself, power down. And that is the cue. That is the cue to me to say, okay, work time is over. Right. Transition to being like a good husband to your wife, transition to be able to take care of your dog, and enjoy life to its fullest now. That time for business is done. Yeah, that's the Cal Newport also says that you physically have to say yourself that power down. Exactly. I have to get into that situation. In the last few months, it's been terrible. I'm back in the hustle mode right now. It's funny because at one point around 2015, I had decided that I was going to work only 20 hours. At that time, I did not consider blogging as work because that was not producing any revenue. But so I would say that I'm going to work as in the one that makes money for only 20 hours. And I was serious about that. It continued for 6 months. It was a lovely time, very simple. I used to work 20 hours, then I would spend another 30 hours or so blogging. But at that time, it was not, I had not committed to anybody. I was blogging at my own pace. So it was more, it was not stressful at all, right? But then I decided, after we had a team, it is almost that they want to succeed as well, right? They want to see the growth. So it's on me to deliver that growth. And with now OpenCV, it is almost like a startup experience again. So this thing is going to continue for another 1 year of this hustle. And then, things will settle down a little bit. But it's tough when you're starting out. And as you said, that discipline is really, really crucial for that. Yeah, definitely. The success isn't, in my opinion, it's not in the action. Success is measured in your ability to recover every day. That's where the real discipline comes in it. Because it's so easy after a hard work day to be like, all right, I'm going to go binge watch some sort of terrible reality TV show, or I'm going to drink a couple beers or a couple scotches and just numb myself to what's going on. But that's not sustainable either. You're going to develop a whole different, issues, which I've gone through too. Like when I was doing PyImageSearch full time, it was just too easy just to be like, all right, I'll have a drink at the end of the night, try and calm down. Yeah. But after a while, your body and your mind starts to reject that, and you feel even more tired the next day. So success should be measured in your ability to actively recover. That to me is the true marker of sustainability. What about goal setting? Do you write down your goals every day, or how does it? How do you set your goals? Yeah, that was basically what I said when I map out my year in reverse. I kind of reverse engineer it. So I'll create my big goal, my 5 to 8 big goals for the year, and then quarterly goals, and then monthly, and then weekly, and then my 3 big things I'm going to accomplish, hell or high water every single day. So the writing part, when you write down your goals, it is the 3 big goals that you want to achieve every day. Those are the ones you write down every day. Yeah. Okay. And it takes practice to do that, because sometimes you'll pick 3 goals that are so simple, you'll get them done in 5 minutes, and you're like, oh, I'm done for the day. And then other times you'll pick 3 big things there, and one of them is so audacious that it really should have had an entire week or month dedicated to it. And you're like, man, I didn't even make a dent in this. So it does take practice to learn how to do that. And in my experience, it took about 2 months to really hone in on 3 things that I could actually accomplish in a single day. But once you get into it, it's such a powerful tool and motivator. Right. I agree with that. So you're managing a remote team right now. Everybody is, but what are the tools that you use to remote? Do you use Trello, and do you actually use Slack and those tools? I am so happy because 2 weeks ago we killed off our Slack group, and I am just the happiest I've ever been. I hate Slack and real-time communications apps with just a passion, because they pull you out of deep work and to deal with questions that are not urgent and honestly should live in an email until someone can get to them. So we used Slack for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And now I brought on a technical project manager, and I was just complaining about Slack. He's Adrian, just kill it, just move everything to email. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, just do it. So like 2 weeks later, we got rid of Slack, and now we have G Suite across the board. So we have our own dedicated inboxes and Google Drive and everything. Which Drive annoys me. Like, I think Dropbox is still a superior product, and I wish Drive would catch up to Dropbox. So we still use Dropbox for file sharing. Previously, we had used Evernote for like writing collaboration, but I guess 6 or 7 months ago, we switched over to Notion, which has been phenomenal. Like, if anyone listening to this has not used Notion, like, just go sign up for it and use it. It'll totally change your life on not only how you personally work, but how you collaborate with others.
So not Google Docs? You don't use Google Docs for collaborating on documents?
No, because Google Docs really sucks for code. Like, if you're
doing like code walkthroughs and stuff, like then
I don't know, maybe there's a macro you could create in Google to like format it and make everything look nice. But Notion, it supports Markdown, so like it's so simple to insert code, to insert fragments. So we rely on Notion not just for collaborating on writing blog posts and chapters, but also for our business processes and for all of our documentation.
I gotta try that out.
Definitely check it out.
Yeah,
phenomenal tool.
I've heard good things about it, but I've never had the urge to try it out.
Yeah, super cheap too. It's like $3 a month for like an individual license, and if you're a team, it's something like $7 per user per month. Like totally worth it.
That's great. Okay, so I think it is time to go to the current Indiegogo campaign that you're running. It is about the OCR book. Now, before we run into this, the OCR book, I want to ask you, how did you come up with the idea? Walk us through the product development stage. What goes through your mind when you're thinking about a new product? Like OCR is something that is a new product in the market. How did you come up with that you're going to do an OCR book and not some other product?
Yeah, so we have prior to the campaign launching, we had 4 or 5 blog posts on OCR and text detection and recognition. And right around when COVID started, I was just thinking of topics that I wanted to potentially write about more. So I looked at our analytics, and time and time again, like month over month, I noticed that our OCR tutorials were always in the top 20. I'm like, that's odd, because while our existing OCR tutorials are good, I would not put them in the top 10% of content that we've ever published. So I'm like, that's interesting. And then I went through email conversations, and I started searching all of our inboxes for terms related to optical character recognition. And I started to see more and more of them. Like, there is actually a market here for OCR. And I wanted to test it out by writing blog post content. That's typically how I do a lot of these content tests. Like, all right, let's dedicate 2 to 3 weeks to OCR, write a couple posts on them, see what the reaction is, take the temperature of the room. And I sat down to do that. And I was like reading the documentation on Tesseract. I was looking at some of the stuff OpenCV does. I'm like, why is this so damn hard? Like, why? Like, I'm like not the smartest person in the world, but like I know how to operate the OpenCV library, and I know how to import Python libraries, and I know how to read documentation. Why am I struggling so much with this? And that gave me the understanding of like, if I was struggling to put together these practical examples for tutorials, then certainly readers were as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of reassessed the situation, and I realized, wait, this needs to be more than just a short series of tutorials. There is an actual market need here where people will pay money for content related to OCR.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And also, there are nuances that it's not like OCR is one thing that you just put it through an engine and it outputs the right thing. Right. It's a nuanced thing. You have to do different things based on the problem at hand. Because if you think about it, a number plate recognition is also OCR, but it is handled slightly differently than, say, if you want to do document analysis.
Exactly, yeah. Totally nuanced. And I think Tesseract, it's such a phenomenal library, but it's changed hands so many times. First, like from Hewlett-Packard to Google, and then been maybe not necessarily supported as much by Google as it was initially. Now Google fully backs it and supports it. But it's as a long history, the documentation isn't fully in place. There's a lot of broken links when you go through the documentation. And it's some of the page segmentation modes aren't fully described. It's very confusing just to pick up Tesseract and be like, okay, like it's installed. How do I? And then you run the engine on it, and you get terrible results back, and then you have no idea what you should be doing to improve those results. It'd be like importing like Keras or PyTorch, getting an off-the-shelf model, and then 2 or 3 lines of code, like you fine-tune a network on a model, but it's only getting like 2% accuracy. And then you go read the docs to figure out how to improve accuracy, but the docs don't exist. So it's this really cyclical problem.
Sometimes you need that pre-processing step that you might have missed, like image alignment, or you may need to, binarize the image better, and suddenly it starts working. But There is this magic that needs to happen, which your book addresses.
Exactly.
So, tell us more about what's covered in the book. OCR is still a very large topic. So what does the book cover, or the books that you are offering in this Indiegogo campaign? What do they cover?
So we decided, or just like we typically do with PyImageSearch books and courses, we want to create like a basic level, an intermediate level, and an advanced level. That way readers can kind of self-segment into what they want to learn and what their particular budget is. So we planned out, I think, about 40 some chapters that we wanted to write, and we grouped them into like the intro to OCR bundle. So this is like your basic of the basics. Like here's Tesseract, here's how each of the segmentation nodes works, here's how you could do basic OCR. Then we cover things like automatic text detection with both Tesseract and OpenCV. And then we also remove Tesseract and say, sometimes Tesseract is too much, and it's actually easier to create basic OCR models using image processing. And it sounds crazy to say, but if you have like controlled lighting conditions, and again, the key is controlled lighting conditions, you don't need machine learning, you don't need deep learning. Basic contour processing and thresholding goes a long way, and I don't think that's fully appreciated in the age of deep learning, because everybody jumps to deep learning. They're like, I have to apply the hot new model to a topic, but in reality, basic image processing can do it.
It's funny because they do that because it is the hammer that they are familiar with.
Right.
The other pure computer vision approach, it makes a lot of sense computationally. It is way less expensive a lot of times, but you need to know that hammer, right? Otherwise,
Exactly.
You can't use it. It's great that those kinds of tricks are covered. So walk us through the basic syllabus, if you would, of that's covered in the book.
Yeah, so I place a strong emphasis on teaching through practical real world projects. I want people to read the book and be like, oh, okay, now I understand the hammer or the screwdriver or the saw that I'm going to pull out of my toolbox and apply to this specific problem. So we cover the basics of Tesseract, like OCRing text and translating it to different languages. We do credit card OCR, reading passports, different forms of text localization. One of my favorite chapters is we actually show how to train and fine-tune custom Tesseract models on your own OCR datasets.
That's
which
very
is
useful.
It's unfortunate because there's not a lot of quality tutorials on how to do that online from complete end to end. And again, we remove Tesseract and say, okay, if you want to train a custom Keras, TensorFlow, or PyTorch model on OCR, like this is how you go about doing it as well. And then we apply real-world projects, so like scanning invoices and receipts, or doing image alignment, document registration, automatic license plate recognition is covered as well. And then also topics that you don't typically see covered but are very important. So OCRing and video streams.
Anytime, even with
frame rate cameras, like you start moving it, you're going to insert motion blur. So how do you detect the motion blur and avoid the computationally expensive process of applying OCR to a frame that isn't going to have readable text on it anyway? And we do stuff with GPUs for OCR, handwriting recognition, which is a very challenging topic. And then, of course, how do you use like the Google Vision API or Amazon Recognition or Microsoft Cognitive Services? How do you leverage those APIs when Tesseract isn't doing the job, but you don't want to have to train your own custom models?
So I like the fact that it is for people at every stage, the people who want to get their hands dirty and know the nuts and bolts of things. It's good for them. But people who want to use high-level APIs, it is just as good for them as well, because you cover both those segments.
Exactly.
Yeah, and in some projects, it may make sense that you have good network connectivity, you have everything going for you, and you should just use Google's or Amazon's API for this. And in other projects, you don't have network connectivity, you're having to work with a Raspberry Pi, which is in some remote area, then you end up using training your own network or using Tesseract, whichever makes sense.
Exactly.
So that's great. And what about the bundles? You mentioned that there are 3 different bundles, beginners and intermediate level, and then for experts. Uh, what is the pricing of the bundle, and what's covered in each one of them?
Yeah, so in the intro to OCR bundle, that starts at $95, and that's strictly for basic, the basic introduction to Tesseract and how you can use OpenCV and image processing for OCR. We cover text localization and detection in there as well, and start to open the door to deep learning. But it's not until the second bundle, the OCR practitioner bundle, that's when you start using deep learning in almost every single chapter. That's where you start to push to the state of the art. That one starts at $195, and then we have the OCR expert bundle, which is $335, and that focuses on your advanced deep learning. That's really pushing the state of the art, and also includes additional bonuses like the printed edition of the text, certificate of completion, and access to our private forums. And each bundle includes like the ebooks digitally, our high quality documented code, our pre-configured virtual machine instance, so you don't have to worry about configuring your VM. Of course, we provide instructions if you want to configure your bare metal machine, and then support from myself and my team. So overall, like, we try and group everything together based off of what someone's experience is, what their budget is, what they hope to learn, and just try and create a good learning experience for all of our customers.
That's great. So one other thing that has always baffled me, and I struggle with it, especially with software products. With hardware, there is a lower limit to what pricing you are going to keep.
Right.
But in software, how do you come up with a pricing model? And this question is mostly for entrepreneurs who are listening to the podcast. How do they come up with a good price when it is a software product? What are the considerations that you think about?
And that's a great question, and it's challenging to answer because even if you talk to your potential customers, you have product market fit, and they're going to buy it. Coming up with that price is hard because maybe you want to do a little survey and kind of figure out what the upper and lower limits of the pricing model are. Well, any intelligent person is going to say lower because they want to spend less money, right? So how do you take that information and then turn that into something actionable that you will actually make money off of? And the first thing I always say is it's a mindset shift. You have to understand no one is going to devalue your time more than yourself as an entrepreneur, because despite running a business, having employees, and showing you're a successful business, you're also a little bit insecure to your own pricing model because you don't want to create something that no one is going to buy. You want people to pay for it. So you really have to approach it first by whatever I think my mind says I should be charging. You probably want to start by doubling that because you're automatically devaluing yourself completely.
Yeah.
So start there. And then I like tiered pricing because it gives people options based off their budget and experience. I think it was Ryan Delk from Gumroad.com. He used to work for them, and for a 3-tier product, you start with your base price, and then your next tier should be double that, and then your third tier should be 2.2 times the middle tier. And that's just a basic rule of thumb I've used ever since 2013, 2014. And I see a lot of other, not just info products, not just software, but a lot of SaaS companies doing that as well. And it seems like a fairly good rule of thumb.
Right. And also, people don't fully appreciate that charging for a product allows you to make better products, right?
Yes.
As entrepreneurs, a lot of people think that money making is the goal, but usually that is not the case. The case is to create stuff. Think of entrepreneurs as painters or artists who are creating, drawing on a canvas. And what this, the price does, selling a product allows them to create better products, right?
Exactly.
For people and helping people. And it's not all about profit. Profit is the means which allows us to build better products, right? To stay in the game. Otherwise, you're out of the game, you're not helping anybody. And there is a lot of free content that you provide that we at Learn OpenCV also provide. So it's there is a ton of free content we provide, and on top of that, we do this paid content so that we can survive and also make a good living. It's perfectly valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I personally feel that one should never be ever embarrassed for selling products, because you're taking, as long as your contribution to the society is more than what you're taking out, perfectly fine.
Yep.
So that's something I always think about. Now, I also, we are running out of time, but I also want to know your thoughts about the future of AI. Where do you think computer vision is headed? In just broad terms, for people who are starting out, not just as entrepreneurs, but also as practitioners, where is the field moving, and what should they prepare themselves with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of evident right now, but I think embedded computer vision and deep learning is where it's going to be in the immediate term, like as evidenced by the amazing like Oak Kickstarter campaign. Like,
Yeah.
There's a need for that type of hardware. There's a need for deep learning on the edge. So that's like the short term, I'd say, the next 5 years. I think looking forward, though, I think we're going to start to see a little bit of regulation at the government level regarding artificial intelligence. And I think it's going to be poorly researched and not very well executed laws.
Yeah.
Kind of like the GDPR for artificial intelligence. It's going to be some politician's baby that he wants to see, going through Congress so he could keep his seat. But in reality, it's going to make zero sense and not going to work out in the long run.
Right.
I think we're going to continue to see these like hybrid open source packages like Keras and TensorFlow and PyTorch that are truly open source, but they're also supported by large companies. So like, Google puts money towards Keras and TensorFlow, and Facebook does the same for PyTorch. And I think it's a good relationship in the short term, because it creates these high quality libraries that people can use not only in their academic work, but also in their professional lives as well. But I think along with that, I think there's going to start to be problems on Google's side. Keras and TensorFlow were originally two separate packages, and now they're being integrated together. And in TensorFlow 2, like, it works, but there's also the concern of what's going to happen in TensorFlow 3 and 4. So is it going to be more TensorFlow API based? Is it going to be Keras API based? Google's going to have a lot of, problems and probably some reconciliation that needs to be done to make TensorFlow 3 even better than what TensorFlow 2 is. And I think PyTorch is going to run into some problems. Not because of the library itself, it's a quality library, but I think they're going to run into issues because of Facebook. Facebook is in the news all the time, and for not good things. We have what's going to be a crazy election in the United States coming up pretty soon. Facebook is going to be talked about during that election. And when you have these like open source libraries that are sponsored by these corporations that do something extremely, extremely wrong, just being associated with those libraries or being associated with that company drags down the rest of the crew as well. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I could easily see something in the next 5 years that knocks Facebook off of its throne and then causes a cascade of problems for anyone or anything connected to Facebook.
Right. Yeah, those political problems are very difficult to gauge how things affect those things affect the library and things like that. But yeah, that's a good thought. I also want to know about your thoughts about online education in general.
Yeah.
Where is the space moving? What do you think?
I mean, I think COVID has just shown us that we're going to have to become better at online education, maybe better video streaming services that properly have digital whiteboards and make it easier for remote learning across the board. I think if that happens, you'll start to see colleges start to lower their prices a little bit in order just to keep people coming through the front door, even though there's less of an in-person experience, because people are biologically wired to think that bad things are going to happen again. Pandemics like this, they do happen every 20 or every 100 years. Happened in 1920, happened in 1820. This stuff does happen, but there is a long enough gap between them that you typically only have to experience one, maybe two in a single lifetime. But as humans, we want to prevent against the downside so much that we think it's going to happen every single year. So I think we're going to overcorrect a little bit with our reliance on online education, thinking that this is going to happen again. But I think it's, in the long run, I think it'll be a good thing. So it'll enable us to be better educated online. But I think
I actually think. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think education itself, like the education sector, regardless if you're talking about computer vision or like, how to, like do knitting, like buying a knitting course on Udemy or something like that. I think education is a lot like the App Store in the sense that we're going to see a race to the bottom. Like you see app developers spend months or even years developing an application,
right,
and sell it on the App Store for 99 cents.
Right.
And people just ridicule the hell out of it. They're like, they pick out every single bug and like, it's like, or they ridicule it because they have to pay 99 cents for it. I'm like, holy cow, like, why are you so upset over this? I think education is unfortunately going to go down that road in the next 5 to 10 years. And it'll be harder to charge more for quality products, and it'll be harder to continue to create super high quality products if the education sector continues the kind of what I call the App Store route.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't go there. I have a slightly different view of where this thing can go. First of all, 30%, the bottom 30% of the universities are going away. 100%. They don't. First of all, they did not have a business model that was sustainable. It was based on student loans, which people are recognizing now that they are getting these degrees, which are completely useless. So that's going to go away. The other thing that good universities are doing, which I completely disagree with, is they are literally putting a Zoom, they're putting a camera and it's the exact same product, right? Yeah. So the teacher teaching on in front of a camera is their new style of online education, which is very wrong. I'll tell you why, because it has all the downsides of an online education, this Zoom kind of setup, and it has none of the upsides, right? I think in the next few years, we will start seeing that there will be these massive online universities, almost like Udacity and Coursera. They are good examples of that, but at a massive scale. But even those two companies are not doing something that I feel is obvious. The online education market, the content creation is almost going the movie industry route. If you have a large audience, then the money that is spent on content creation will skyrocket, right? Because you could have $2 million invested in a single course, and then the content creation, you want to teach something, there will be animations and very high quality stuff. It's not just one professor drawing on the board. I have this example. When I first learned about differential gears back in undergrad, I had a hard time visualizing what it is because I was reading it in a book and it was not even part of my curriculum. I was just interested in it. Mm-hmm. And recently I saw a video of it on YouTube. It took me 1 minute. Oh, this is it. Yeah, this is so easy. It just showed the animation and it showed the meshing of the gears just the right way, removed all other distracting things. And it took me 1 minute. And I know that when we produce our content, 10 minutes is equivalent to 1 hour of lecture time. Sure. And that these universities are completely missing that. It's almost like creating a small movie. A low budget movie is what a course would look like, with production staff and all the high quality graphics and high quality animations, etc. But we'll see how that goes. Unless it goes the App Store route, and everything will be ruined in that case. So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs as well as people starting in the computer vision? How do they get started? How do they, how do they move forward if they're complete beginners?
I think if they're complete beginners, they're probably debating like, is this worth doing? Is this for me? And if it is, how do I go about doing it? And if you're having those questions, I liken it to the analogy that I made about learning guitar. Like when I tried to learn guitar as a 6th grader, my teacher focused on theory. That's not in my opinion, a good way to start if you're figuring out whether or not you like something. Go to opencv.org, go to Learn OpenCV, go to PyImageSearch, follow one of the install guides, get OpenCV installed on your computer, and follow some tutorials. And not even purchase a book or course yet. Just run a tutorial, type the code out in an IDE, because that's where you're going to be spending a lot of your time if you choose that as a career path. So just figure out if you like it, and if after an hour or two you're like, yeah, this is great, maybe consider investing a little money in a book or a course so you could continue to develop your knowledge in a structured way, ensuring that it's a linear progression and you're not bouncing around from YouTube to Coursera to whatever website you find online. So at that point, like it's all about getting started. Stop worrying about libraries, stop worrying about programming languages. Just pick Python and then pick OpenCV and just dive in. And if you like it, your natural curiosity is going to start to spread, and it's going to take you the rest of the way. For entrepreneurs, it's at that point, I assume at that point you already have some knowledge over computer vision. Maybe you've done some research projects as well. But I would say try and do human automation first while you're trying to find that product market fit. Because the SaaS apps have the same problem, because as a lot of SaaS apps are owned by developers, they're started by developers, sometimes dog fooding by scratching their own itch. And as developers, it's so easy for us just to focus on writing the code because that's where we're most comfortable. We enjoy it. We're in our comfort zone. We're in our element, and we love doing that. Yeah. The problem is that you may realize you're building the wrong product, or you'll disappear into a hole for 6 months, code up this glorious app and come out ready to present it, and then realize it's just crickets because you built the wrong product. You're a problem in search of or you're a solution in search of a problem, right? You just solved something that never needed to be solved in the first place. So entrepreneurs in the artificial intelligence space have to realize that they have all of the traditional problems of software development for productized services or for SaaS applications, along with all the science-based problems of how do we get the accuracy that we want? How does this scale? How is this going to work in a real-time application? So you have all of those theoretical considerations as well.
Yeah, so the last thing, I want to ask you is any parting words for people? How can they reach you? And, you have this Indiegogo campaign going on right now. I highly encourage people to go there and check out the book. I'm pretty certain that the quality of the product you finally build will be extremely high quality. And so tell people how can they reach you. We will put the link to the Indiegogo campaign right under this post, wherever the video is shared. But any other way people can reach you, any other comments that you would like to add?
Yeah, if you want to see more of the content I offer, you can go to PyImageSearch.com. That's PY as in Python, imagesearch.com. We have over 400 free tutorials that you can learn from and read through. We have a number of books and courses if you're interested in our paid education. You already mentioned linking up the Indigogo campaign. There's also a banner at the top of our website that you can click and check it out. Otherwise, you can send me an email. My email is adrian@pyimagesearch.com. And there's also a contact form on our website as well that you can use. Otherwise, I predominantly use Twitter and LinkedIn as my social media tools. My Twitter is @PyImageSearch, and then you can look for me on LinkedIn @Adrian Rosebrock. I think LinkedIn has a cap on the number of connections you're allowed to have. I think it's currently 30,000. I'm starting to bump up close against that. So if you wanna be a connection before then, make sure you get your submission in so I can accept it. Otherwise, thank you, Satya, so much for having me on the show. It's really a privilege and an honor. I'm so happy for you and the entire OpenCV crew. It's been a crazy 20 years, and I'm happy that you guys are on a path to profitability and sustainability, and making sure the library is here for another 20 years for all of us to continue to use. So thank you again for all the amazing work you've done, for the community has done. It's just truly a testament to what open source has created and the businesses that it's allowed to be built. So thank you to everyone involved, OpenCV, past and present. None of us would be here without you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. And because I know your time is valuable right now, especially we are in the middle of a campaign. When does the campaign end? That's the one last thing I want to.
So let me make sure I have that right, because I'm horrible at date math. It is September 21st at 11:59 Pacific time.
All right, great. So I wish you all the best for the campaign. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a very successful campaign.
Thank you so much.